body and landed down the center.
Okay, we'll start with this. Tomorrow night in Indio, California, unbeaten up-and-comer Gabriela Fundora, the younger sister of Sebastian Fundora, the towering Inferno, will be returning to action, attempting to advance to a professional record of 8 wins, no losses, and no draws, with 4 knockouts against seasoned journeywoman
Lucy Hernandez.
Oddly enough, this will be a part of a Golden Boy Promotions show, a Golden Boy Promotions card set to go down on the West Coast. There are at least 2 fights on this card that have my attention. Jasmine Artiga, unbeaten Jasmine Artiga, the animal, versus Amy Salinas. And DAZN is listed as the network this is supposed to be taking place. DAZN is listed as the broadcast partner. I say oddly enough because up until recently, Gabriela Fundora was doing a lot of business with Samson Lukowicz, her big bro, Sebastian Fundora, being one of his fighters. I'd figured that if he were going to take Gabriela anywhere, it would be over there to Showtime to box under the PBC banner. As it stands, her next ring appearance is going to be part of a Golden Boy Promotions show. Golden Boy Promotions, they've got a couple of female fighters. They've still got a few left, even with the absence of Sinicia Estrada, who very recently parted ways with Golden Boy Promotions as her promoter. They still have Marlena Esparza. They still have Costa Valle. I believe they still have Aureli Musinho as well, former champion Aureli Musinho, who actually beat Lucia Hernandez.
Yeah, she beat her 2 fights ago.
Lucia Hernandez, who sports a professional record of 7 wins, 12 losses, having been stopped 2 times. She fought Aureli Musinho 2 fights ago, lost a unanimous decision. She's coming off of 2 consecutive UD losses.
But I don't think this one's going to be a UD loss. I don't think this one's going to go to the cards. I think Gabriela Fundora is going to knock her out.
Gabriela Fundora, who much like her big brother, is quite statuesque for her prescribed weight class, quite statuesque for her division. The flyweight division, as this is being billed as an 8-round flyweight contest.
Gabriela's still amassing professional experience. She's not an Olympian. She doesn't come from some extended amateur background.
She comes from a fighting family, and she is essentially learning on the job. She's only 20 years old to the more seasoned Lucia Hernandez, who's about 12 years older, 32.
And I take no issue with the fight. This is the kind of fight I expect under these circumstances.
With a professional record of just 7 wins and no losses and no draws, less than 10, less than 15, less than 20 professional contests, I don't expect Gabriela Fundora at this age to take on the Lions, the Tigers, and the Bears in the women's flyweight division. I don't expect her to take on Godzilla when she's only 7-0 at 20 years old. I'm perfectly okay with this fight, which very much is an experience fight, a learning fight, to get some rounds in the bank against an experienced fighter, albeit a journeywoman.
This being a flyweight contest and Golden Boy Promotions being the ones promoting it, you get the sense they might navigate Gabriela Fundora to perhaps a Marlena Esparza fight sometime down the line.
Far down the line. I don't think that Gabriela is close to fighting for an alphabet title just yet. Not at this age, not at this stage in her career. But Marlena Esparza is a Golden Boy Promotions fighter. This is a Golden Boy Promotions show, and you get the sense that that might be an idea that they're playing with for the future, but not the immediate future. There is also...
You know what they do? Maybe they have Gabriela fight Leonela Judica sometime down the line, and then if she wins that fight, grabs that belt, she can unify it with Marlene's 2 alphabet titles.
Now, what I don't expect is for Gabriela Fundora, or Marlena Esparza for that matter, to go sniffing around Gabriela Celeste Alaniz for her WBO title. Gabriela Alaniz is a high-risk...
Gabriela Fundora is not ready for Gabriela Alaniz.
And I feel that Marlena Esparza, if she still looks to unify beyond this upcoming Eva Guzman fight she's about to have, it would sooner be against Leonela Paula Judica for her IBF title instead of Gabriela Alaniz's WBO title. That's the way I think that's going to break down. Just back to Gabriela Fundora and tracking her progress. She actually debuted as a professional last year, and she managed to squeeze in 5 fights, 5 professional professional contests last year. One of them ended up being a no contest, but better still, her handlers are doing a good job of keeping her busy and keeping her active. She fought 5 times last year. She's already fought 3 times this year. And this upcoming Lucia Hernandez fight tomorrow night will be her 4th fight of this year, leaving her plenty of room, plenty of time to schedule yet another fight later on this year, before this year is out.
And this is ideal because, as stated, Gabriela Fundora don't come from some extended amateur background. She's essentially learning on the job.
These rounds she's picking up fight by fight give her invaluable professional experience. It really is the ideal situation for such a young fighter, keeping them active, keeping them busy. In winnable situations, yes, but situations where she can learn something and develop, hone her skills as a fighter. She's very young, only 20 years old, has a high ceiling, real punching power, the potential to become a multi-weight champion given her generous physical dimensions. I like what I'm seeing in Gabriela Fundora, and look for this tomorrow night on DAZN. In other news, former fighter and champion Paulie Malignaggi very recently reacted to Ryan Garcia's comments about belts and being the face of boxing, all that jazz. Paulie said, gotta have a real belt to be the face of boxing, to which Leonard Smellerby replied, nah, with all due respect, that was the old days. Times have changed. If everyone is being honest, whether you like it or not, Floyd Mayweather is still the face of boxing in 2022. What most don't understand is the sport of boxing is bigger than the diehard fans. I deal with facts.
Well, of course he's going to say Floyd's still the face of boxing in 2022. Leonard's his water boy.
Attempting to take a stroll down memory lane, relive the glory days of carrying Floyd's spit buckets.
Being shoved in a broom closet by Jay Prince's henchmen.
Yeah, because Floyd Mayweather tried to short Jay Prince on some money, tried to short him on a deal, and if it wasn't for Bob Arum
cutting a check to Jay Prince to smooth things over, who knows what would have happened.
Better still, this is Leonard Ellerbe's veiled attempt to compensate for his inadequacies as a promoter in 2022. Of course he's going to say that his employer, Floyd Mayweather, is still the face of boxing in this era, so many years after Floyd retired from the sport, because no one that he is currently promoting.
Nobody that Leonard promotes can be dubbed the face of boxing because nobody that Leonard promotes draws more than Canelo Alvarez.
I mean, that is what this is all about. Shading the actual face of boxing here today, the actual face of boxing in America, Canelo Alvarez. In America, nobody draws more than that guy. So what Leonard Ellerbe will resort to doing is bringing up the name of retired Floyd Mayweather based on what he used to do and what he used to draw, when here today, he's retired.
Yeah.
He's not actively participating in the sport of boxing anymore.
Yeah.
So how could he be the face of it? Out there in the Middle East, boxing an old sparring partner in Don Moore.
Yeah.
If he's the face of boxing,
What were the metrics for that fight?
what did it do at the box office? What did it do at the gate? What interest did it generate? What business did it drum up? If he's still the face of boxing in 2022, did that sparring match with his old sparring partner draw worldwide attention? Did it draw a big gate, big revenue, big pay-per-view buys?
Because if he is still the face of boxing, it would have.
But it didn't. Floyd Mayweather is seeming more and more like a has-been, struggling to stay relevant in a world that has moved past him and his era. Leonard Ellerbe is little more than a guy who's still riding his coattails.
After all these years, he still is.
Because after all these years, he's still Floyd's employee. He still works for that guy. So of course he's going to tell the company line and say something like this to disguise his inadequacies as a promoter.
As a promoter, he hasn't developed or groomed any fighter that went on to be the face of boxing. Here today, he's really only promoting one guy, just one guy.
A guy who doesn't draw in America what Canelo Alvarez draws in America. Thus, you can't dub him the face of boxing. The most you can do is bring up the name of Floyd Mayweather,
A retired fighter.
whose name Leonard is only bringing up because Leonard wants to attach himself to Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s success, not realizing that you haven't been able to duplicate it because you didn't manufacture it. You didn't develop Floyd Mayweather as a fighter. You didn't groom him. Top Rank did that.
That's why you haven't been able to duplicate that success. That's why no one at the PBC has gone on to become the same draw that Floyd Mayweather was.
This conversation isn't exclusive to Leonard Ellerbe and Mayweather Promotions. The PBC as a whole, and their entire network, their entire umbrella, and all the smaller promotional outfits that work with them. Not a single one of them went on to become the same kind of draw that Canelo Alvarez is because, well, for starters, the PBC didn't groom Floyd as a fighter. They didn't develop him. He developed under Top Rank.
I've long felt that Al Heyman gets a little bit too much credit for Floyd's success when Floyd's success is directly related to his ability abilities as a boxer.
And his abilities as a boxer were honed, developed, and sharpened under Top Rank before he parted ways with that promotional outfit. There was no PBC to groom Floyd when Floyd was becoming Floyd.
If it was so easy for Al Heyman to manufacture this kind of success like people claim he did with Floyd,
why hasn't he done it? In all the years that PBC has been around as an outfit in the sport of boxing here in America, why haven't they mass-produced a couple of Floyd Mayweathers, one or two?
if Al Heyman really is the fucking wizard that he's made out to be, then why hasn't he produced so much as one draw?
One draw that draws enough in this era to be called this era's face of boxing. Why hasn't he done it? I'm sure he'd like to.
You can't duplicate Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s success because he was a generational talent. His generational talents were developed under the Top Rank banner.
I've often felt that Floyd Mayweather Jr. and the fighter that he became, his abilities, he owes that to Top Rank more than he owes it to Al Heyman, because Al Heyman knows fuck all about grooming fighters and developing talent. If he knew anything about that, we'd have 2 or 3 Floyd Mayweathers running around.
But we don't, do we?
And Leonard's only bringing him up because none of the PBC's active fighters, save one retiree from the previous era of boxing, rival Canelo Alvarez's drawing power. This is all about shading Canelo Alvarez and the massive draw that he has become.
How much business has Mayweather Promotions and the PBC done over the years with Showtime Boxing?
But I don't recall Showtime ever giving any of their fighters $40 million up front, $100 million for a 2-fight deal, the way they were ready to give that to Canelo Alvarez. So what does that tell you?
They don't offer Gervonta Davis or Errol Spence Jr. prices like that. $40 million up front, $100 million for 2 fights, just 2 fights.
That's why Leonard Ellerbe feels so inclined to conjure up the name of retired Floyd Mayweather Jr., who was last in action in the Middle East against an old sparring partner in a glorified sparring match. I hate to break the news to you, but that event, whatever it was, it didn't draw worldwide attention, didn't do big numbers at the box office and big numbers at the gate.
A lot of people didn't know where to watch that fucking thing because it wasn't picked up by any networks in this country.
You say that Canelo Alvarez is this era's face of boxing, and you might bump into the odd guy that says, well, Canelo owes his success to Floyd Mayweather Jr., but not every fighter that Floyd Mayweather Jr. fought went on to become the face of boxing, so that's hardly accurate.
Floyd fought a lot of guys. Victor Ortiz, Robert Guerrero, Andre Berto. Did any of those fighters go on to become the face of boxing?
No, they didn't. So how does Canelo Alvarez, having fought Floyd Mayweather all those years ago, equate to Canelo owing his success to Floyd?
It doesn't. A lot of people fought Floyd. They didn't become the face of boxing. He did.
Moreover, the only reason Floyd even fought this guy was because he already had star power. He was already developing a following, and granted that following did grow over time. Better still, that's why Floyd looked at him in the first place, because he was already a draw.
These people like to think that Floyd Mayweather sold all these millions and millions of pay-per-view buys by himself.
Floyd Mayweather was as successful as he was at the box office because he fought other fighters that had followings like himself, like Manny Pacquiao, like Canelo Alvarez, Miguel Cotto, etc., etc. Floyd Mayweather Jr. himself was not the sole reason.
He didn't sell all those fucking pay-per-views by himself.
And what this is, these comments we see here from Leonard Ellerbe, it's a little more than a veiled attempt to try to shade Canelo Alvarez for becoming this era's face of boxing, because neither he nor Al Heyman have been able to develop
a fighter that could rival his drawing power.
They can't do it. If they could, they would. All they really can do is bring up Floyd.
It's pathetic.
And just in keeping with the theme of mediocrity, mediocre individuals and their mediocre comments, Jermall Charlo very recently was quoted as saying, I want to fight Demetrius Andrade next, so y'all need to stop talking shit. I want to fight him next. I want to fight Oscar De La Hoya, David Benavidez, Demetrius Andrade, and Chris Eubank Jr.
Listen, sweetheart, you've been on the same side of the street as David Benavidez for years now.
If you wanted him, you'd have him, because David Benavidez has wanted to get you in the ring for some time now, and he's been very vocal about it. As far as Chris Eubank Jr., we all know he's currently in talks to take on Conor Benn. And while the fight isn't finalized yet, you're a day late and $1 short when it comes to fighting that guy, because that guy...
A lot of people forget that Chris Eubank Jr. had a brief stint on the PBC as a PBC fighter. He fought Matvey Korobov there.
So why didn't that fight happen? For the longest time now, there's been a group of individuals who wanted to make the PBC out to be the land of milk and honey, where all things are possible. But all the PBC has really become synonymous with over the years are fights that haven't happened. Missed opportunities.
Like the one with Demetrius Andrade, who was last in action in November of last year.
That was his last fight under the Matchroom banner on the DAZN platform. Now, all of a sudden, Jermall says he wants to fight that guy, but you know what? If you were serious and your people were serious and the PBC were serious about making that unification match, you've had ample time between November of last year and now to do that fight. You're calling him out at a time when he's currently under orders to face his mandatory challenger.
And bear in mind, that order to face Eubank, it just came
back down, as this is the second time that Demetrius Andrade has found himself under orders to face Kazakhstan's Eubank Alimkhanuly between November of last year and now. There was ample time and ample opportunity for the PBC to pick up Demetrius Andrade, who had just become a network and promotional free agent, in order to do a unification match with Jermall Charlo. But Jermall Charlo is a fighter that likes to...
You know what he does? He gets a little bit of liquid courage in him, shoots off at the mouth, name drops everybody, and makes empty promises.
That's what he does. It's what he's been doing for years. It was in 2020 that he said he'd go up to super middleweight and take on David Benavidez. Approximately 2 years later, he still hasn't done that.
Now, all of a sudden, he's interested in Demetrius Andrade at a time when he's currently under orders to face somebody else. He's not at liberty to fight you now.
A day late and a dollar short. He talked about Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin 3, saying Triple G should not be fighting Canelo. Canelo beat your ass, so fight me now.
You're on the wrong side of the street, sweetheart.
Both Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin are Matchroom fighters that fight on the DAZN platform, and you're over there on Showtime.
You're on the wrong side of the street.
Does that sound familiar? How many times did we hear that in reference to the Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. fight that still hasn't been made?
Back when Terrence was with Top Rank, what did they used to tell that guy? They used to tell that guy he's on the wrong side of the street.
Well, so's Jermall Charlo when it comes to these guys and these fights, because he's not a bigger name than Canelo Alvarez by any stretch of the imagination, and he's not a bigger name than aging Gennady Golovkin. Those are both big name, marquee fighters with more marquee value than he's got. So if he wants those guys, is he ready to cross the street?
No, he's just doing what he always does, sitting on his hands, shooting off at the mouth.
Jermall Charlo, who was supposed to face Maciej Suliecki earlier this year until he allegedly suffered a back injury. No news on when he'll be returning to action. Not that anybody cares, because he's not going to be fighting anyone that anyone wants to see him fight.
You know what he ought to do? He ought to jump into bed with Matchroom, jump into bed with DAZN, so maybe he can get the winner of Canelo versus Golovkin 3.
Or the loser, whoever it is. It'll be a better fight, bigger fight than any fight he's had in recent memory. Hell, has Jermall Charlo actually ever fought in a big fight?
The PBC seems to have the inside track on the super middleweight division, but he hasn't moved up there yet.
Doesn't look like he's ready to. He'd rather sit on his hands and sit on that belt, hold it hostage.
Hey, listen, it's more of the same from this guy. What do you expect?
What am I supposed to say?